See now stories of infidelity and stories of betrayal. I never imagined that my life would take such an unexpected turn, a turn of events that would alter everything I thought I had under control. That summer in Chicago, at age 40, I thought I had achieved the stability that many dream of. My marriage, solid for 15 years, reflected a long-lasting partnership. My career as an editor at one of the city's most recognized publishing houses was a source of pride, and my house in the suburbs was a true haven of tranquility. But in an instant, everything changed. I received a call that, at first glance, seemed simple, but had the weight of something transformative. On the other end of the line, my best friend Jessica's voice was full of concern that I couldn't ignore. "Emily, I need to ask you a big favor." She began hesitantly, as if she didn't want to overwhelm me, but at the same time she saw no other way out. "It's about my son, Jason. He's been accepted to the University of Chicago to study architecture, but I don't know who to turn to help him adjust. Do you think you could?" I didn't need to finish the sentence. Deep down, I already knew what she meant. And at that moment, I felt like my life was about to change in ways I could never have predicted. Before I continue with my story, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and turn on notifications. Jessica and I had been inseparable since college. Although life took us on different paths, she moved to sunny California while I stayed in the Midwest. Our friendship remained rock solid, unwavering in the face of distance and time. So when she called me, I didn't hesitate to offer to help. "Of course, Jessica," I replied immediately, without needing to think twice. "I'll be happy to help Jason. He can stay with us as long as he needs until he finds his own place." The image of Jason came to mind, a distant memory from the few times we had seen each other at family gatherings. The last time I saw him, he was a 16-year-old, awkward and shy, barely able to express himself. Now, 7 years later, I was preparing to welcome a young adult into my home. On the day of his arrival, Mark and I went to the airport to pick him up. As I waited in the terminal, my mind wandered, trying to imagine what Jason would be like now. Did he still carry that teenage shyness, or had he transformed into a self-assured young man, ready to face the world? Every detail of this new stage made me curious and, at the same time, eager to discover who Jason had become. The answer came in an instant, as soon as I saw him walk through the arrival's gates. My heart skipped a beat for a brief moment. Jason had transformed into a tall, athletic man with a captivating smile and green eyes that seemed to pierce my soul. His brown hair, slightly tousled, gave him a casual air that contrasted with his carefully chosen clothes. For a second, I was left breathless. "Aunt Emily," Jason exclaimed upon seeing me, using the affectionate nickname he had always used, even though we were not related by blood. He wrapped me in a tight hug, and I could feel the firmness of his body against mine. An unexpected shiver ran down my spine, and I quickly pulled away, surprised by the intensity of my own reaction. Mark, oblivious to my inner turmoil, greeted him enthusiastically. During the drive home, my emotions swung between pride and a strange uneasiness that I still couldn't quite understand. Jason spoke excitedly about his school plans and the excitement of starting a new chapter in Chicago. I tried to focus on the conversation, but every now and then my eyes would stray to the rearview mirror, where I would find those green eyes staring at me with an unsettling intensity. It was as if there was something unsaid between us, a tension I couldn't ignore. The first few days passed without any major incidents. I devoted myself to showing Jason around the city, helping him get familiar with the campus and its surroundings. Mark, busy with his work as a lawyer, barely spent any time at home, which left Jason and I alone for most of the day. It was during one of these walks through the city that everything began to change. As we walked through busy streets, I sensed something different in the air, a subtle but undeniable shift that seemed to infiltrate our moments together. Conversations, once light and carefree, began to carry a weight I couldn't explain. Every word, every glance exchanged seemed to have a deeper meaning, something that stirred my emotions in a way I wasn't ready to deal with. The city I knew so well suddenly seemed full of new secrets, reflecting the silent transformation taking place between us. In Millennium Park, as we walked in the soft glow of the sunset, Jason suddenly stopped and turned to me, his green eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my heart race. "Emily, I want to thank you for everything you're doing for me," he said, his voice soft and making my skin crawl. There was a sincerity in his words that disarmed me. I don't know how I would have been able to adjust so quickly without your help. I tried to keep my composure and respond nonchalantly. "You don't need to thank me, Jason," he said, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's my pleasure to be able to help you." But then he took a step forward, closing the distance between us. "No, really. You're amazing, Emily. I've always admired you, ever since I was a kid." His words took me by surprise, and I felt a sudden warmth rise to my face. For a brief moment, I lost myself in his eyes, so full of emotion that it seemed impossible not to be drawn to them. It was at that moment that reality hit me like a bolt of lightning. The situation was becoming dangerous, and the line that must never be crossed was fast approaching. The weight of the moment was undeniable, and I knew I needed to regain control before something irrevocable happened. But the intensity of that gaze, Jason's closeness, everything seemed to conspire against reason, leaving me trapped in a confusion of feelings I wasn't ready to face. I took a step back, breaking the spell that seemed to envelop us. "I think we'd better get back," I said quickly, trying to hide the urgency in my voice. "It's getting late, and Mark should be getting home." The walk back was shrouded in a tense, almost palpable silence. I could feel Jason's gaze on me, and every time our arms accidentally touched, an electric current ran through my body. "This is wrong," I repeated to myself over and over. "He's your best friend's son, young enough to be your son. You're married, for God's sake." But as hard as I tried to keep my composure, something had changed inside me. The days that followed became a sweet torture, where every moment alone with Jason was an internal battle between desire and reason. I found myself spending more time than usual getting ready in the morning, choosing my clothes with a care that reminded me of a teenager getting ready for a date. It was a dangerous game, where the rules seemed to crumble with every glance exchanged, with every smile he gave me. And even though I knew I should keep my distance, there was a part of me, a silent but powerful part, that longed for those moments, that wondered what would happen if I let down the walls. Reason screamed at me to get away, but my heart, already confused and shocked, began to whisper another story. And so, caught in this silent war, I tried to keep up appearances, all the while feeling myself being drawn further and further into something I didn't know if I could control. As I showed Jason how to use the washing machine in the basement, the inevitable happened. We were home alone. Mark had left town on business. As we bent down to load the laundry, our hands touched, and in that instant, the air seemed to fill with a palpable electricity. Jason slowly turned to me, his eyes burning with a desire that mirrored my own. "Emily," he whispered, his voice with an intensity that made my heart race. Before I could react, his lips found mine in an intense, passionate kiss, releasing all the tension built up over the past few weeks. My hands instinctively tangled in his hair as he pressed me against the washing machine. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to lose myself in those sensations, the taste of his lips, the warmth of his youth, the vigor of his body against mine. It all seemed so real and at the same time, as if I were outside of time, where good and evil were confused in the midst of that overwhelming passion. But then, like a bolt of lightning, reality hit me. The basement walls, which had once seemed to protect us, now closed in around me, bringing me back to the awareness of what was at stake. On a desperate impulse, I pulled away from Jason, my heart still beating wildly, as guilt and desire intertwined in a whirlwind that threatened to consume me. That moment of weakness had changed everything, and now I found myself staring at an abyss, desperately trying to find a way back, even though I knew it might be too late. I pulled away abruptly, panting, my heart pounding in my chest. "No, Jason, this is wrong. We can't," I said, my voice shaking. He looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and desire, as the charged silence between us seemed to stretch on for an eternity. "Why?" he asked, genuine pain in his words. "I know you feel it too, Emily. You can't deny it." The truth was there, raw and inescapable. "I'm a married woman, Jason. And you're my best friend's son. This can't happen." The words came out with difficulty, fighting against every fiber of my being that screamed otherwise. Before I could respond, I ran out of the basement, leaving Jason alone, wrapped in his own confusion. I ran up the stairs as if fleeing from something I couldn't face and locked myself in my room. My heart was still racing, echoing the confusion that plagued me. What did I do? How did I let things get this far? I thought, as I tried, in vain, to organize the emotions that were taking over me. Later that night, lying in bed next to Mark, who had returned late from his trip, I couldn't sleep. My mind relived the kiss with Jason, the feel of his lips, the warmth of his body against mine. It was as if every detail was etched into my skin, a haunting echo I couldn't silence. The weight of guilt mixed with fear, and yet in the midst of it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt alive, intensely alive, as if the world had taken on new colors, even if those colors were dangerous, forbidden. And it was this mix of life and fear, desire and guilt, that kept me awake, staring into the darkness of the room, while Mark slept peacefully beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. The days that followed were a delicate dance, punctuated by furtive glances and tension-filled conversations. Jason and I tried hard to maintain a facade of normality in front of Mark, but the atmosphere at home was saturated with a palpable electricity. Every accidental touch, every moment we spent alone, felt charged with pent-up sexual tension, like the air was about to explode. One afternoon, while Mark was at work, Jason found me in the kitchen. He approached me with a determination that made my breath catch. "Emily, we can't go on like this," he said quietly but firmly. "I know you're married. I know this is complicated, but what I feel for you is real. I can't just ignore it." I sighed, leaning against the counter behind me, feeling the weight of his words. "Jason, I feel something too," I confessed, my words coming out almost as a whisper. "But that can't be. There's too much at stake." The silence that followed was deafening, each second feeling like an eternity. Jason didn't look away, his eyes locked on mine, filled with a mix of desire and pain. The reality of our situation was undeniable, but it was also what made everything even more unbearable. We were caught in a dangerous game, and we knew there was no way we could emerge unscathed. He moved closer, and the warmth of his body became a tangible presence between us. We were so close we could feel each other's hearts beating, and the desire to be together became almost a physical force. His words, filled with tantalizing promise, hung in the air, dangerously seductive. Part of me wanted to give in, to throw myself into his arms and forget the world around us. However, the rational part of my mind fought desperately to maintain control. I don't know how we could do this, I said, my voice filled with sadness and desperation. Let me show you, he whispered, and before I could protest, his lips met mine again. This time I had no strength to resist. I gave myself over to the kiss, allowing my hands to explore his young, firm body. We kissed with unbridled passion, as if the world was about to end at any moment. Finally, when we broke apart, we were panting, desire and guilt mixing in a storm of emotions. I knew I had crossed a point of no return. There was no denying what I felt for Jason anymore, nor what he felt for me. The intensity of our feelings had become undeniable, but there was no ignoring the reality of the complications this would bring to our lives. We have to be careful, I finally said. If we decide to go down this path, no one should know. No one. Jason, his expression serious and determined, agreed. I understand. It will be our secret. And so began our clandestinity. Over the next few weeks, we found gaps in our routines to steal moments together, savoring furtive kisses and caresses whenever Mark wasn't home. Each encounter was a dance between unbridled passion and suffocating guilt. I felt like a teenager again, reliving the forbidden thrill of a secret love, a love that was both exciting and dangerous. The adrenaline of living on the edge of discovery fueled an intense flame within me. Every furtive glance during family dinners, every coded message exchanged with Jason added excitement to my life that I hadn't felt in years. Over time, however, the weight of guilt began to become unbearable. Every kiss from Mark, every whispered, "I love you," seemed to stab me in the heart with the force of a sharp knife. The image of Jessica, imagining how she would react if she found out what was going on between her son and me, filled me with paralyzing terror. One particularly critical night, while Jason and I were in the guest room, enjoying the moment when Mark was out with his colleagues, the sound of the front door opening made our hearts race. Panic set in instantly. Jason hurriedly hid in the closet as I struggled to rearrange my clothes and fix my hair, the chaos of our movements reflecting the desperate tension of the moment. "Emily, are you up there?" Mark's voice echoed from downstairs, cutting through the silence with its familiarity. "Yes, honey. I'm just changing the sheets in the guest room," I replied, my voice shaking slightly in the hopes of sounding natural. Mark walked up the stairs and into the room, his curious gaze fixed on me. "Are you okay? You seem a little upset." "I'm fine," I repeated quickly, trying to hide the panic in my voice. "Just a little tired. I didn't expect you to be back so soon." He walked over and I smelled a faint scent of alcohol on his breath, a sign that the meeting had ended earlier than planned. "Where's Jason?" My heart skipped a beat when I heard his name. "He's with some friends from college," I replied, trying to remain calm. Mark nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation, and with a suggestive smile, he advanced towards me. I felt a wave of panic wash over my body, fear and guilt intertwining as he approached, making the atmosphere almost oppressive. Jason was hiding just a few feet away, cowering in fear in the closet, and I knew I couldn't let the situation play out like this right now. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry," I said, forcing a yawn to cover my nervousness. I'm really exhausted. How about we go to sleep? Mark looked at me with a disappointed expression, but nodded in understanding. Sure, it's been a long day for all of us. We left the room and headed to our bedroom. As I lay next to my husband, my mind couldn't get away from the image of Jason trapped in the closet, waiting for the moment when it was safe to come out. That night was a turning point. The reality of what we were doing became painfully clear. The constant danger of being discovered was beginning to overshadow the thrill our adventure had initially provided. I realized we couldn't go on like this indefinitely. Something needed to change. In the days that followed, the torture was palpable. Every time I looked at Mark, guilt consumed me. Every moment alone with Jason was fraught with tension that transcended desire. We knew a decision needed to be made, but the fear of the consequences loomed over us, leaving us paralyzed with uncertainty. The heavy silence was broken by Jason, who faced me with a seriousness that left me speechless. It was a normal afternoon, but the weight of the conversation that was unfolding seemed to make the atmosphere oppressive. "Emily, we can't go on like this," he said, the tension in his voice reflecting the desperation we both felt. His words, direct and unforgiving, shook me deeply. It was a devastating truth that we both knew but were afraid to face. I felt a painful lump in my throat as I nodded, unable to find an answer that didn't involve hurting someone. "I know, Jason, but what can we do? I don't see a way out that doesn't end up hurting someone." He looked at me intently, his eyes searching for a solution that seemed unattainable. "Maybe it's time to be honest. With Mark, with my mother, with everyone." The thought terrified me. "Are you crazy? Do you realize what that would mean? It would destroy my marriage, your relationship with your mother, and your friendship with Jessica." The weight of the revelation hung over us, and the magnitude of the potential consequences seemed almost unbearable. What seemed like a forbidden passion now unfolded into a web of complexities and potential harm, demanding a painful and inevitable decision. Jason spoke with the softness of someone already lost in the maze of his own decisions. "I know, Emily," he began, his voice carrying a painful weight. "But don't you think we're destroying our lives, day after day? At least, if we're honest, we'll have a chance to face the consequences with dignity." His words hit me like an unexpected blow. He was right. With each passing day, the secret we carried became a poison that corroded the foundations of everything we'd built. Each lie, each disguise, slowly undermined the foundation of our relationship. "I understand what you're saying, Jason," I replied, the sincerity in my voice revealing the depth of the dilemma we faced. "But I know we can't go on like this. We need to be honest with everyone, including your mother." He nodded, his face pale and determined. "You're right. I owe it to my mother, just as you owe it to Jessica." The thought of facing Jessica paralyzed me with terror. How could I explain to him that, in addition to betraying his trust, I had fallen in love with his son? The pain of revealing that, in addition to violating a vow of friendship, it had involved deep and complicated feelings seemed unbearable to him. The truth, as inevitable as it was terrifying, rose like a wall before us, demanding that we face it with courage and honesty. The next few days unfolded as a whirlwind of emotions and confrontations, each moment charged with an almost palpable tension. Mark returned briefly to collect more things, his face a mask of pain and resignation. The silence between us was deafening, a barrier that seemed impossible to overcome. Jason and I came to the inevitable conclusion that the best solution was for him to move into a dorm on campus. The atmosphere at home was filled with unbearable tension, and we knew we needed some distance to reflect and decide what we really wanted. Finally, the moment I feared most came with grim certainty, facing Jessica. I decided it was best to do it in person. I booked a flight to California, my heart pounding from the anxiety surrounding every part of the trip. Jessica greeted me with a welcoming smile, a gesture that quickly fell apart when she saw the seriousness on my face. We sat in the living room, cups of tea now cold in front of us, and our smiles forgotten. "Jessica," I began, my voice shaking, "there's something I need to tell you, something that will hurt you deeply." "I'm so sorry." I saw concern fill her eyes as she began to reveal the truth. I spoke of Jason, of our affair, of the devastating way I destroyed my marriage, and the betrayal that surrounded our friendship. The words escaped like an uncontrollable torrent, punctuated by tears and desperate apologies. When I finally finished, the silence that followed was absolute, deafening. Jessica looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if the woman in front of her was an enigma impossible to decipher. Her eyes, once filled with affection, were now filled with pain and betrayal. "How could you, Emily?" Her voice was choked, filled with deep suffering. "You are my best friend. I trusted you to protect my son, not seduce him." I felt the weight of her words, each one piercing my heart. "I know, Jessica, and I am sorry. I never wanted this to happen. She cut me off, anger replacing the initial shock. "Did it just happen? Did you trip and fall into bed with my son?" Her words were like slaps, each one marking a spot of pain. I knew I deserved her fury, her contempt, but that didn't make the suffering any less intense. "I have no excuses, Jessica," she said, her voice soft and filled with regret. "I can only say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry, and I'll understand if you can't forgive me," I said, my voice filled with regret. Jessica stood up, turning her back to me in a gesture that seemed to cut the air between us. "I need you to go, Emily. I can't. I can't look at you right now." I stood up, each movement feeling like a titanic effort. When I reached the door, one last attempt to communicate how much I cared made me pause. "I love you, Jessica. I've always considered you my best friend. I'm so sorry I ruined that." I didn't wait for a response. I left, tears blurring my vision as I walked to my rental car. The flight back to Chicago was a haze of self-reflection and regret. I had lost so much: my marriage, my best friend, the trust of the people who mattered most to me, all because of an affair with a man much younger than me. When I got home, I had an unexpected surprise. Jason was waiting for me. He was there when he should have been in the college dorms. Sitting on the porch, Jason looked at me with an expression that was a mix of worry and anticipation. "Jason, what are you doing here?" I asked, feeling a tumultuous mix of relief and anxiety at the sight of him. He stood up and walked over to me, his expression serious. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, the seriousness in his voice cutting through the air between us. "I've been thinking a lot over the past few days, and I think we made a huge mistake." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. What we have isn't real. I have feelings for you, it's true. But is this enough to justify all the damage we caused ourselves? Your trust, my relationship with my mother? Is this love genuine or just a fantasy, an escape from the monotony of our lives? His words echoed through me, giving voice to the doubts I had tried to silence. Was I in love, or was it just an illusion, a way to escape the reality that plagued me? I don't know, Jason, I answered truthfully. I thought it was love, but now I'm not sure of anything. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of our actions and their consequences weighing on us. I think I need to leave, Jason finally said. Not just this house, but Chicago. Maybe it would be best if I got away for a while, traveled a bit, and cleared my head. The thought of seeing him leave brought a sharp pain to me, a sense of impending loss. Yet I knew he was right. We needed space, time to think and heal. I understand. I replied softly, my voice barely above a whisper. I think it's best for all of us. Jason nodded, and for a brief moment, I saw the unsure young man who had knocked on my door a few weeks ago. His expression held a weight of regret that echoed in every word he spoke. I'm sorry, Emily, for everything, he said sincerely. I'm sorry, too, Jason, I replied, tears threatening to spill over again. We hugged briefly, a gesture filled with regret and a silent goodbye. Then I saw his figure disappear into the darkness of the night. I stood on the porch, in front of a house that no longer felt like a home. Darkness enveloped my loneliness as I stared at the ruins of the life I had built. I had lost so much and now faced the consequences of my actions alone. Over the next few months, I sank into a deep period of introspection and rebuilding. Mark and I divorced, a painful but inevitable process. Jessica eventually agreed to listen to me again, though our relationship was never what it was before. Jason kept his word. He traveled frequently, sending postcards from faraway destinations. Meanwhile, I began to rebuild my life, immersing myself intensely in work and seeking redemption in the pages of the books I edited. I began therapy, confronting the demons that led me to such destructive decisions. A year after that fateful summer, I received a letter from Jason. He was in Europe, studying architecture and discovering himself. He thanked me for what he had experienced, but he also confirmed what we both suspected. What we shared was not love, but an illusion, an escape from reality. Reading his words, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I was finally able to close that chapter of my life, and sadness for all that I had lost in the process. However, I also felt a new hope. Despite my mistakes, I survived. I learned and grew. Now I had the chance to build a new life, based on honesty and integrity. As I watched the sun set over the Chicago skyline through the window of my new apartment, I realized that this was my second chance. A chance to be better, to love more truly, to live with more purpose. And this time I wouldn't waste it. Now tell me what you would do in my place. If you liked this story and want to follow more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your comment below. Your opinion is very important to us. Until next time.